Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. There are two guests that are here in the studio to talk about special education needs of children and, more importantly, what parents can do. Let me introduce two of them. Debra Clifford and Mary Frances Palisano, Child Advocacy Team Co-Chairs at Gibbons P.C, which is a law firm in Newark I know very well. I've done some leadership coaching there, and they are one of the underwriters of what we do on this series. But the whole question of special education, first of all, define it. What is it?
Special education is a series of accommodations, services that are provided to children with disabilities who are identified as needing services to help them obtain an appropriate education.
Okay, but what's interesting is when I was doing some teaching around leadership and you were one of the students in the class, one of the things I learned is that you have a very personal connection to this subject. Share that with folks.
I do. I have twins who were born at 25 weeks. So they had a lot of cards stacked against them from the very beginning. So when they were discharged from the hospital, they immediately started receiving services from the state. And when they were 3 years old, those services transitioned from the state to the school district that we lived in at the time. So they were immediately identified. They were given individual education plans, which we refer to as IEPs.
Right.
And they started to receive services, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, some sort of cognitive therapy to help them get to, to catch up.
Is that accessible to all children, all parents in the state of New Jersey?
Well, the child has to be identified, and whether the child is either identified by a parent who goes to the school and says, I think my child has a problem, or the school has an obligation to affirmatively identify those children that they think might have a disability.
But there has to be an evaluation, correct?
That's right. So the process is when a parent thinks that their child needs services, they can write a letter to the school, and it has to be in writing to advise the school.
You can't just call the school.
No, it has to be
in writing.
It has to be a written
and
letter.
What has to be in there? Do you have to describe what it is you're seeing? What are you looking for?
Well, you just have to notify the school that there's issues that you want the child study team to look into.
Such as?
Well, there could be a reading problem. There could be dyslexia is very prominent right now. So a lot of school districts are doing a lot of programs to help kids who have reading issues. And teachers sometimes identify students in the classroom, and that's another way that a child can be referred.
So a teacher could see it, a parent could see it, but if we're primarily our objective is to help parents right now, what would you say parents should be, quote unquote, looking for? Because then the advocacy part is even more challenging.
Right. Well, parents have to, as most parents do, they monitor how their children are doing in school, communicate with the teacher. I mean, if you're talking about an elementary level, you have parent-teacher conferences where they identify, your child may be struggling here, struggling there. And, the question, don't be afraid to question, does my child have, do you perceive that my child has a disability? Do they have a reading problem?
Raise the issue?
Raise the issue.
Even if you're afraid of the answer?
Yes.
Because?
My motto has always been early intervention and as much of it as you can.
Why early?
When these kids are little, you've got to get to the problem and start dealing with it at an early point in time, because then you're setting them up to be more successful, to be able to, receive the education that you want for your child.
Talk about this. Why a law firm involved in this at all?
So sometimes there's disagreements
Between whom and whom?
Between a school district and a parent about a service. For example, we had a client who had twins, and one of the twins was reading, and this was in about kindergarten, and the other twin was not. And that parent was concerned that the child had some sort of disability. And that parent brought it to the attention of the school, proper procedure, the written letter, and the school looked at the child, and the child was denied services. So when a child's denied services, you only have a few options, and sometimes you need lawyers to get involved to assist you with that process.
Someone says devil's advocate. Someone says, I don't want to get lawyers involved. I'll handle it myself. You say?
That's your right, but I wouldn't recommend it, because the school is going to have a lawyer.
Why would the school have a lawyer to deal with an issue having to do with a child with potentially special needs, providing them or not? Why is a lawyer involved
Because
for the school?
At certain points in the process, if the school denies you the service, or if the school has to file what's called a due process petition, which is then goes before the Office of Administrative Law. And there are different scenarios that trigger that due process
Is this a
petition.
state? I'm confused about this. Because public schools, say in the state of New Jersey, largely governed by state law because of the 1947 Constitution and what is required, a thorough and efficient education for each child. Is that why this is such a litigious, potentially, or legal process?
Well, as far as there's the federal law and then there's the state law.
What does federal law have to do with it?
Well, it comes into play because it's the Individuals with Disability Education Act. And so as far as that, there's also the state law, which is the administrative code that also comes into play.
Which
You have federal
implements-
and state law?
Right. And
Go
the
ahead.
state law implements the IDEA, the Individual with Disabilities Education
How the
Act.
heck would a parent, quote unquote, navigate this?
It's very difficult
very
to
difficult.
navigate. And if you, for example, if you don't know the correct terminology, I had a client
The
the other
lingo,
day.
the jargon, the acronyms?
And there's a lot of that here. So I had a client the other day that wanted their child to be in a classroom that had 2 teachers in the classroom. And you hear that referred to as in-class support or in-class resource. And for example, she thought it was a co-teaching class. And sometimes she just got hung up on those words because she wasn't familiar with the lingo
Right.
and the jargon. And some of the other things that, the school districts say, and Deb and I were talking about it the other day, we
The
could create a
ABCs.
list.
Do they have their own language?
They do, and you could have a parent who walks into her first meeting with a child study team, and they'll say, "Oh, hey, hello, Mrs. Smith. Here we have the OT, the PT, the BCBA, the psychologist, the social worker," and
Exactly.
we gave
All
her
the acronyms.
All the acronyms.
And how does a parent figure out what those terms mean and what does it mean, what it means to his or her child?
Unless you ask, and unless you take the time, and some days they'll have 6 IEP meetings scheduled back to back, and we're not here to disparage school districts.
Not at all.
We know
No.
they do
They're
the
challenged.
best they can.
They've got limited budgets. The state funding
Correct.
law, state school funding law has never been fully funded. Let's clarify that.
Right.
So it's not about for or against school systems.
No.
It's advocating for children. By the way, some of the children we're talking about here would have a hard time advocating for themselves.
Correct. And Deb and I first got involved in this program through our pro bono program through Gibbons, and we have a very robust program at Gibbons, and we help a lot of people in the community. So this isn't an issue that just
Pro bono.
affects,
Right.
but
Right.
this isn't an issue that just affects poor families. It's all families in the state, and everyone is having difficulty navigating because it is such a difficult area and so specialized that whether you're a poor family, whether you're working just to put food on the table, or whether you're a wealthy family, you're highly educated, it's a very difficult system to navigate. And you just have to make sure that you follow the right procedures, because there are very strict procedures.
Deb, before I let you go, because you have such a personal connection, we have talked about this off camera.
Yes.
What is the most important thing you've learned by being a parent of a child with certain needs? Most important thing you've learned personally?
Personally, early and often. Get in there early. Pay attention to what's going on. Ask for help if
How
you
tough
need
do you
help.
have to be?
It depends, because I had a wonderful experience. I had 2 case managers throughout my children's lives that, but for them, I would have been lost, because this was before I did this, before I took this on as a practice. So they guided me through, but you could have someone in the same school district that had a horrible experience.
You would want for other parents and other children the kind of experience you had?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, these people were my guardian angels, navigating me through the system.
Debra and Mary Frances, I want to thank you for joining us, because I have a feeling there are a significant number of people watching, parents watching, weren't sure where to turn, and you just gave valuable advice. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.
We'll be right back, right after this.
Also brought to you by Delta Dental of New Jersey and by the Nicholson Foundation, changing systems, changing lives by advancing health and early childhood in New Jersey.